Hey, everybody. I realized I completely dropped the ball this morning and forgot to record the meetings that we had. So I just want to take a few minutes and give the highlights of what was covered this morning so everybody's on the same page, and also take advantage of this time to just share a quick summary of some of the things that we've covered early in the week for those of you that couldn't participate in those other meetings and just wanted a one-stop shop to get yourself up to speed on some of the tools and tricks that we've covered so far this year, or this week, sorry. Um, First of all, let me just celebrate you guys and tell you how incredibly impressed I am. So far this week, we've had 182 different Brandon School District employees sign in to our various trainings. 182. That is insane. I have no idea how many staff members we even have in the district, but to have 182 people sign in and participate in the trainings just absolutely floors me. And it just magnifies your professionalism and your desire to keep doing what's best for you and what's right for our kids. And truly, truly humbled and floored by that. So thank you for your commitment to our kids, yourselves, our district, your classrooms, whatever your role is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So far this week, we've had a few trainings. And again, I just want to try to summarize some of them very briefly so that if you get any free time or you're just sitting around the house over the next couple of days, you just want to refresh your skills or do a quick little reflection to make sure that you actually can access some of the items on your to-do list. You can feel confident that you can do these things. So I'll start off with Zoom. Zoom is the platform that you guys have been using a lot this week. And I know you've been playing around with all the bells and whistles. So just a quick little audit. As I go through these things, just ask yourself, can you do these tasks? If not, write yourself a note to go figure out how to do it. Watch some of the other videos from earlier this week or reach out to a friend or a colleague and just practice and experiment. One of the first things you should be able to do, though, is you should be able to schedule a meeting in Zoom. When you sign in, you should be able to go to schedule a meeting, copy that URL, send it out to a group, or send calendar invites to people. You should be able to also click that little button that says require a password or deactivate that if you don't want the participants to have to access a password. All the trainings I've done this week have not required a password. It's just been that one click and you're in type of thing. But you might want to experiment with both of those to figure out your comfort level. You should also be able to mute your participants and stop their video. That's a great feature as a host or teacher to be able to do so that you know that you can control what's happening in your learning space and try to keep things quiet and calm, or to help those people that might not know how to unmute themselves or to how to show the video, you can go in and take care of that for them. You should also be able to create your own virtual background. You do that by looking at that video button on the bottom left. Right next to it, there's that little caret or the little arrow. Click on that, and one of the options is create virtual background. And you can use any picture, any video that you have saved to your device, or you can go online and find one and change your video background. It's a cool feature just to help engage your learners. You should also be experimenting with or practicing with the annotation feature. Annotation is when you share your screen. Remember, you share your screen by just clicking the button at the bottom of your toolbar that says share. People will be able to see whatever you have on your screen. When you have that up on your screen, your learners, your participants can scroll to the top of the screen, click the little green bar right next to that. One of the drop-down choices will say annotate, which means they can then write things on your screen. Did that today in our secondary meeting when we were talking about some of the essential learnings. A couple of people actually used one of the slides I had up and they started putting check marks next to some of their items of choice, which was awesome, proving to me that they could actually do that. So you should be able to experiment with the annotation feature. Similarly, you should be able to use the whiteboard feature. The whiteboard feature is truly just a virtual whiteboard. You'll get a whiteboard. You can draw all over it. You can have a text box on it. Your learners, if you so choose, based on your settings, could also add and contribute to your whiteboard. You access that by going to the share screen, and instead of designating your monitor screen to be the thing that's duplicated, you can click on white screen and that comes up, or whiteboard, and that's what comes up on the screen. You should also experiment with the breakout rooms. These are the absolute game changers in Zoom. At least I think they're the game changers in Zoom. We experimented with these a little bit today as well. It's where you can create small groups amongst everybody that's in the big overall meeting. When you designate breakout rooms, you can choose the number of people to go into each breakout room. You could, if you want to, manually also choose who the people are that are in the breakout rooms. Then those individuals get to have private conversations. They can actually only see themselves and the people that are in their room of choice, whether it's 4 or 5 other learners, they're having their own private conversation. They can see each other, talk to each other, but nobody else can interact with them. But you as the host can pop into each of the breakout rooms and guide the conversations, listen in, provide feedback, prompting, whatever you need to do. The breakout rooms are really, really cool. So play around with that. You should also be able to do the chat feature, which is where you can write messages to each other, either privately or to the entire group. And last but not least, the thing that I keep dropping the ball on, you should be able to record. When you record your meetings, you can either record them to save to your desktop, or you can record them to the cloud. If you send them to the cloud, just know you have to have a pretty strong Wi-Fi connection, because if you have spotty Wi-Fi, your recording might drop. So I've just been saving mine to my desktop, and then I send them out to everybody else. But if you save them to the cloud, when it's done, you'll just get a web address, a URL that you then send to everybody, and they just click that and they can watch it. So either one works for me. So that's a quick snapshot of what we've covered so far in Zoom. Lots of cool features. Just do a quick little mental checklist. Can you do all of those things? And which ones should you be practicing over the next couple of days, weeks, months? Today, we also had some powerful conversations that I want to highlight before I jump into some of these other things. First of all, we had a high school teacher today who made a comment that I thought was absolutely amazing, and I'm so glad he brought it up. He made the statement that we don't need to just be focusing on right now. We also need to be thinking about next year. And that's a statement that I think can go a lot of different directions, and each one is powerful and spot on. The conversation that we then followed up having is that our students right now are missing out on some key instructional time. And although it's important for us to take our fingers and stick them in the dam and stop the water from pouring through right now, we also have to recognize that next year, the 2020-21 school year, our students are still going to have the same standards, the same expectations, the same assessments at the end of the year as every other class prior to this year has had. So right now we're losing this pivotal, important time that we could be using to add a new layer of foundation onto next year's learning. So although it's important for us to continue to support our parents right now with some supplemental engagement, enrichment activities, those things are great, and our parents greatly appreciate it. Pretty soon we're going to have to start making sure that we're focusing on what's essential and important right now, so that next year isn't lost as well. And that this doesn't become a snowball effect where we're constantly playing catch up because we've lost this chunk of time. We are going to have to double down and really focus our energies to make sure that next year isn't lost as well. And another comment that came today from an elementary teacher, she was really focusing in on the equity of our students, making sure that we realize that all means all. And that although we're doing a lot of things right now virtually and digitally and with computers, that not all of our students and not all of our staff will have access and the ability to learn, grow, and achieve if we just focus on the digital world. We need to make sure we're providing opportunities for all students to continue to grow. We can continue to deploy devices and Wi-Fi, but as we've experienced a lot this week, even if you have a strong, reliable internet connection at home and you've got your own device, you still have some issues you've got to deal with. You've got your schedules that you're wrestling with. Maybe you have multiple people in your house all competing for one or two devices, all competing for your own Wi-Fi bandwidth. And even with what you consider to be reliable equipment, you still might have some struggles and some issues. You can only imagine what that might be like for some of our learners who have never had a laptop or a desktop or a Chromebook at home before. And now we're asking them to learn a new skill, a new platform, while they're continuing to learn our content as well. So if we can focus on distance learning and not just virtual learning, focusing on reaching all of our kids in a lot of different capacities, whether it's paper, pencil, hands-on, engagement activities, not always focus on the computer, I think we'll be okay. So just have that in the back of your mind. So then today, we also talked about the essential standards. Today's conversation was really, how do we focus in on what matters most? And today I shared some slides with everybody. I'll share them with you guys really quickly for this conversation. Hopefully this will work in a one-man show. So let's see what we've got. So let me see if I can move some things around. There we go. So I start off by sharing my cell phone number with people. I'm going to put this on here again. Feel free to text me at any time, even if you're on vacation and you just need some help or support. I'm working almost 24/7 right now. So at any time, reach out, ask your driving questions, and I'll see what I can do. I talked a little bit about the show Love at First Sight today. It's a show that I absolutely despise, but my wife loves. The essence behind the show Love at First Sight is you have people who submit they submit to a personality test. They sit down with psychologists or psychiatrists and social workers and the whole nine yards, and they go through a battery of personality assessments. And then these experts match them up with somebody. these two people then that are then married, literally married, even though they've never seen each other, never met each other before. And the premise behind the show is all the drama that goes into it and whether or not it'll work and won't it work, whatever. Again, I can't stand the show, but it's reality TV at its finest. And I use that example to say that even though sometimes we have all these experts that feel like they have all the answers, their answers don't always match up with reality, with the real world. Because even on that show, even though the experts match people, 50% of the people still end up in divorce, just like the real world. So I say this to say, I'm going to show you some things right now. I don't want you to take my word for it. I don't want you to take anybody else's word for it because they're the so-called expert and run with it and say, well, they said this is what I have to do. You still need to look at this stuff and have conversations with your peers and your colleagues based off of your students, your needs, and what you know is best in your heart of hearts. So I'm going to give you some examples and we'll just rock and roll and go from there. Today, we did an activity in breakout rooms where I asked people to describe the moment they fell in love, the moment they learned how to swim, or the moment they learned how to read. And we talked about the fact that none of these can be identified within a single moment in time. That when people were trying to describe these moments, they all told stories to describe the entire process. We also discussed that none of these were places where there was a definite endpoint. Learning how to swim, unless your name was Ryan Lochte or Michael Phelps, you still have a ways to go in becoming a master swimmer. The reading, unless you're reading Shakespeare every day, or maybe you can read in German and Spanish and Mandarin and a bunch of other languages, there's still some things that you can learn to become a master reader. And the moment you fell in love, we talked about that and how the right answer is that you're still falling in love. Even though you might describe that moment, your eyes first locked across the room or you had your first dance, you're still falling in love. These things are all processes, as are all moments of learning. And we said that that's an important feature for us to remember when we're looking at what's going to be most important for our kids to know. Because the way that our standards are written here in Michigan and really almost every single state in our country is that they recognize that learning is a process. Although you might only teach third grade, your element that you are focused on is part of the overall process, because the standards were written with the end goal being setting kids up to be college and career ready at the end of 12th grade, so that in 11th grade, you have a piece of that same process. In 10th grade, you're still part of that process, all the way down to kindergarten. What we teach in kindergarten and first grade should be part of the process towards getting a kid to master content by the time they leave our entire system. We all play an important part of the entire process. None of us have a responsibility that's taught in isolation to get a kid to get it or don't get it. And we said that that's really one of the shortcomings that we've stumbled across in education over the last 10, 15, 20 years is focusing on got it, don't got it, proficient, not proficient, and throwing these labels on as though learning is black and white and binary when it's really not. This is the slide that some people took to annotating today, which is very cool. And we just talked very briefly about how sometimes we can get into these subjective debates about who's got it or doesn't got it more. I use the example of Usain Bolt and Dean Karnazes, two runners. Dean Karnazes ran the Appalachian Trail, like 700 miles. He's an ultra marathoner. Usain Bolt, world record holder in the 100-meter dash. If I simply said, who's a better runner? You could have a good debate as to who's got it more. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, who's a better basketball player? Hemingway or Orwell, who's a better writer? Stephen Hawking or Albert Einstein, who's a better scientist or mathematician? Unless you define what the it is, you're going to have lots of debates. And the same thing is true in our classrooms. If we were to say, who's the best third grade student, or who's the best reader, who's the best math student, unless we just define what reader is or what math student is or what third grader is, we can have lots of debate. And that's where the standards come in, so that we can really articulate the it that we're responsible for. The problem is, here in the state of Michigan, our standards are kind of monumental. And I picked this out, and this is a slide I've shown you guys in the past, where in 6th grade, just with our core subject areas of math, science, language arts, and social studies, there are 257 total standards that the state expects our students to master by the time they are done with 6th grade. That equates to mastering a standard every 0.7 days. And again, mastery, not just covering, mastery is a pretty big deal. If we throw the electives in there, the 3 biggest electives in the state, art, music, and PE, it's 1,431 standards that a student is expected to master. So if you're looking at this like I am, you say there's no way, and that's absolutely true. There's no way a kid can master all of those. So we as the educators, this is where we get to start making some of our educator judgments as to which of these are the most essential, which of these are the most important to provide those building blocks for the future. We can mention a lot of them, we can cover a lot of them, but which are the most essential? 6 or 7 years ago, when we first moved from MEEP to the MSTEP and from ACT to SAT and Common Core and all that, I actually asked the MDE a lot of questions about this and asked, how are we supposed to be able to pick what's the most important? A lot of conversations back and forth. And in essence, this was something that I stumbled across, and I actually mentioned to them and got that little wink, like, yep, you figured it out type of thing. In essence, what they told me is that 80% of the standards that are assessed, aka the essential ones, 80% at every grade level, from third grade all the way on up, are at the application stage and above. A student has to get 40% of the items correct in order to be proficient or to be labeled as got it. So 80% are application and above, so application, analysis, synthesis, or creation. Student has to get 40% of those correct, which means we need to make sure that those are the ones that we're focusing on going forward. We can also look at the standards and say which one of these endure, which one of these recur every single year and are essential for students to master in third grade, to be successful in fifth grade and in eighth grade. Which of the standards are provide leverage, and do we see the same skills from math to science to language arts? And one of the things that I have done is I've gone through all of those 257 standards at every grade level and identified what are considered to be the most essential standards, which ones we should be focusing on going forward throughout the entire year and in this given period of time that we're in right now. So I've just taken our standards, figured out where they fall in Bloom's taxonomy, tried to figure out where they are, if they have leverage and endurance, and came up with a document that we can all utilize going forward. Again, the MDE has their site with all the standards on it that you're more than welcome to go look at. I actually encourage you to. But what I have done is I have taken all of those standards and try to look at both our curriculum guiding documents like Atlas that some of you use, some of the curriculum resources like Bridges that we use, some of your Google Classrooms at the secondary level. And I've tried to put this puzzle together to figure out what hasn't already been taught, what still needs to be taught, and what's the most essential. And I created this document just to get the conversation going, saying if we went back to school and our first week back, what would be those essential things that would need to be taught at every grade level in a variety of subject areas. And this is a document that if and when we come back, I'm going to be asking for your help to tweak and adjust, because I did this based off of the information I was able to find. Again, I have the list of all of the essential standards, and I tried to plug them in based off of what I think is still remaining to be taught, that we can make sure that this year is setting ourselves up for next year, as our colleague said earlier today. We want to make sure that we're providing value to our students going forward, that we're not just giving busy work and packet work. We want to make sure that there's value. But what's exciting to me, as I looked at the standards or the essential learnings going forward, is that the vast majority of the standards that we still have that are essential are those standards that deal with real world application. You'll see a lot of things that say using real world scenarios, or for example, there was one in here that said, write a letter to a local state representative describing a current crisis occurring in the world today. Thinking, oh my gosh, the relevance to some of this stuff today is right there. And so many of these standards are things that we can teach and explore with our kids that don't require technology, don't require computers, don't necessarily even require our holding their hand. It's more giving them the opportunity to go experiment, explore, and get messy and get dirty. So one of the expectations that we'll have is that we have consistency amongst grade levels and within subject areas. So at the high school level, for example, if you have 3 or 4 teachers teaching Algebra 2, all 3 or 4 of those teachers would have the same the same standard, the same essential learning that they've agreed upon for a given week. How they decide to structure their daily planning to go along with that is kind of up to them, but at least the same content would be presented and the same expectation would be there at the end of the week, so that next year when students come to us, we know what they've had, what they've been exposed to, what they've learned, and what they've mastered. I would also ask for lots of conversations and collaborative conversations to take place amongst teachers so that we can really focus on how we can provide digital online content for kids, how we can also provide some of that distance content, how we're going to collect evidence of learning, what's the assessment going to look like. And I'll just tell you, it's not all going to be paper, pencil, Google form assessments here, which is amazing. this is one of those things I'm looking at saying this is really an obstacle turned into an opportunity. So that's what we've covered so far this week. It's been a lot. We've had a lot of great conversations, a lot of good meetings, and I'm expecting more of these to happen. Next week, when you're on spring break, relax a little bit, lean into your family a little bit, look for just some of that downtime, reflect a little bit. And again, just see where you are on your own planning to see if you feel like you're on track or not. If you are one of those 182 people that have attended the trainings this week, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're one of those people that might not have been able to work some of those trainings into your schedule just because you've been busy or learning or trying to get out ahead of the curve, lean into some of those people that were a part of this so that when we all come back and we're all united again, we can truly be united. All right. Have an amazing day. And thank you again for all you're doing.